Wrokdown.
Hi, welcome to Wrokdown. I'm Wendy Stapleton. Back in the early days, we had very few songwriters. A large proportion of the songs were provided by DJs of the day, and songs were often hits by overseas bands and offered to local artists. However, our next guest had hit songs running through his veins. He was inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame last year, and now he's officially famous. Would you please welcome Mr. Brian Cadd?
Hello, my darling.
How are you, Brian?
I'm fabulous.
Thanks for coming in.
Oh, it's great.
I know you're very, very busy at the moment, so let's start at the beginning.
Oh, dear.
Are you frightened?
No, but it's 40 years. We'll never cover it. Do you realise that's right? 40 years I've been on the road.
Really?
Yeah, that's how you get to look like this.
Oh, stop it. You started much earlier than 40.
That's right. I'm lying.
No, seriously. I read a little piece on your childhood in Perth, and you were offered either tennis lessons
Or piano
lessons.
Yes, and I've sort of ducked the real reason, but the real reason I can confess now that I'm officially famous is that there was a great gal who was starting piano lessons at the same time I was made this offer, and I could get the slot immediately following her. So it meant that every Tuesday afternoon at 4:30, I got to see Cheryl.
You really are a muso, aren't you?
That's right.
Cheryl.
Riding on the way. I can remember her name and everything.
Did this talent come out of nowhere? I mean, obviously there had to be someone in the family that was involved in music.
Oh, it's a classic story. My mother was a really highly trained and really excellent contralto, with the only single drawback being that she could never face an audience, which is a serious one. So when I came along, she transferred all of the things that she wanted to do into me. So she was, in that sense, probably a classic stage mum in a sense. And so because I was the first kid and I was, stumbled over the piano at a young age and banged around for a while, she took that as a sign from God that I was going to be a musician, and off we went. But it was great. Without her, that would never have happened. I would have probably been doing something else completely. For instance, she, at the age of about 10 or 11, she entered me in what was probably a junior New Faces back then, and all little kids. And Rolf Harris had started, and then he went
on television.
Yeah. So I went in. They had heats, and I went in. I won my heat, and you're supposed to go and play off with all the other guys and the gals at the end of the thing. Anyway, the next day the producer rang and said, "Listen, we've got an idea. We're going to form a band of some of the kids that have been on, and they'll play every week. Would your son like to be in it?" And she said, "Oh, of course he would." What? And so from the age of 10 for about a year or so, I was on television all the time.
So it was like a Perth version of Young Talent Time,
yes,
sort of, or Brian and the Juniors.
Yeah.
All those shows, the Tarak show.
And as you know, once that sort of thing happens to you, then you just know what you're going to do forever.
You can't get out, I know.
That's it. And how lucky were we? Because people like us always knew that's what we were going to do. And to be born so that you could be 20 in 1966 was the greatest gift I was ever given, because that was the centre of music, the centre of the universe in 1966. Everything that was going to be the future had just happened, the Beatles, the Stones, and we were right there in the beginning of it. And it was a fantastic time to be in the music industry. There was no money or anything, but we were only after the chicks and the beer and the flash shirts. And somebody said, "Oh, there's a check." I went, "Oh, a check. Better buy beer."
What was your first band?
The first band that I was in that actually had a record deal was a band called the Jackson Kings.
Oh.
And we were signed to CBS. See, it's all another fortuitous sort of event, really. And our stable mates were a group called The Group, G-R-O-O-P.
Ronnie Charles.
But no, before that. And they'd had 2 hits, massive hits, with another lineup. And then 2 of the guys from the group left. But we used to do support for the group when we were around, and they were sere really big and successful. And we were the other ones, We had a couple of singles out that Stan Rofe played. Anyway, the 2 people left for England, and it left this gap. And they'd seen us play, obviously. So they asked Ronnie, Charles and myself to join the band. As a matter of fact, they asked Ronnie Charles to join the band. And Ronnie, God love him, said, "Well, I'm not going to join unless I can bring the piano player." And they said, "Not only do we not want any piano players, but out of all of the piano players we want him least." But anyway...
Why?
I don't know. They were not that sort of a band. Anyway, we talked him into it, and I arrived. And it was sort of... from then on, it just was a blur. It just was fantastic. I mean, the first song I ever wrote, I wrote with a drummer. It's a song called "Woman You're Breaking Me," which went number one. And I thought, how long has this been going on? This is fantastic.
And that was with, did you say?
With Richard Wright, the drummer.
With EMI or?
That was with CBS.
CBS.
Yeah, and it was an amazing time to be in a rock band, and particularly to be in a rock band that had a record deal, you know.
Number one.
Nobody had it ever made. We never figured out where the money went. It didn't matter, sort of. But within the next year, in 1967, we won the Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds, and we were off on the Castle Felice without stabilisers to England.
We're going to take a short break and be back soon.
Wrokdown.
Hi, welcome back to Wrokdown. Our special guest this evening is Mr. Brian Cadd. Was the music at the time that you were in that band more English?
Yeah. But I think that was true all around the world. Even in America, the Americans had lost power at that point. You know, I mean, they'd led the race all through the 50s and early 60s. Excuse me. And then when the Beatles came out, and before that, you know, the Animals and the Yardbirds and all of those fantastic early groups, the whole accent of music switched to England, including the American point of view. They all, you know, the Americans didn't want American bands. They wanted English bands as well. So England had this fabulous run there for a while. But traditionally, Australians had been trained to go to England. You know,
yes.
That's what you did.
It was almost like, what do you call it, a pilgrimage?
A rite of passage, yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
you had
like
to go and see where your
lemmings,
ancestors came from.
No, even if you didn't come from England. But and what it was everyone raced out and got a job and saved. And they all went to Earls Court and ran out of money and came home. But it was that's how you grew up in those days.
That's right.
And for us as musicians, the same thing happened. We all went to England. It actually backfired on me later on in Axiom because we were still under the impression that that's where you went. And Axiom was really the first Australian country rock band, I suppose. And at the time when we went to England, there was the Flying Burrito Brothers and Poco and the beginning of the Eagles and the early Linda Ronstadt. So if we had to turn right and gone to Los Angeles, instead of going left to England, it would have been a really different story because we would have fitted in perfectly with that.
That was exactly the question I was going to ask you because to me, as from Axiom on, I used to go and see Axiom, to me it was always a much more American sounding band.
Oh, our first single was called Arkansas Groves.
Yeah.
In fact, Stan Rofe criticised us for not using an Australian name.
But England was notoriously hard to break into too, wasn't it?
Unbelievable. Because everyone in the world had the same dream as we did. I can tell you a story. I'm a massive Rolling Stones fan, as you know. And we used to get dressed up. We had no money, but we had one set of great clothes, you know, leather jackets and boots and everything. And we'd spend all morning, you know, and fighting to get into the bath and get all puffed up and ready. And then we'd go up and down King's Road all day, like 500,000 other bands, to be seen, you know. We couldn't afford to buy anything, but we'd go to the pub and We'd do a round of the pub and not actually buy a drink and go out the other door, and we'd all look fabulous like we were successful rock people. You'd be walking along and a Rolls Royce, I remember one day, and the Rolls Royce pulled up just right in front of us, and out fell Morris and not Andy, what's the eldest one? Barry. And just fell out and went, oh, hey guys, you know, and off they went. I mean, it was all like that.
So they'd already
they'd already made it. And I promise you this is true. I actually was standing outside the Chelsea drugstore, which was like the happening place to be. So you just sort of stood and swayed around outside. And they used to play music on speakers that came out in the streets, and they were playing, hello, Chelsea drugstore. Have your prescription filled. You know, you can't always get what you want.
Oh, yeah.
They were playing that song, and I swear to you, during that verse, Jagger walked out of the Chelsea drugstore, and I thought, this is the centre of the universe.
This is the centre of the universe.
This is it.
America, with the bootleg band, you took the band over.
Such an adventure. And really, in a lot of respects, we did accidentally do some firsts. We were the first Australian act in its entirety to do live American rock television. We did Midnight Special and
Did you?
Don Kirshner's rock concert. And they were things that no Australians had done live before. And it was such a big thrill of us. But because, once again, we had no clue what was right and what was wrong. We just kind of fell into it and did it like you do, you know. It wasn't until after we had our picture taken with Wolfman Jack and everything, and we were walking out and Tudor said, do you realise that that's actually historical? That was in the time when you could make those kind of things. Now everything's been done and people go to America now, you know, on a Thursday and come back on the next Friday.
Literally go over, record an album.
You know, whereas in those days it was a hell of a commitment. I mean, when I went over, I left here in '74 and I was committed to being over there for a year because I'd signed with Capitol Records. But I finished up spending 21 years there, actually.
I was going to say you ended up living there for...
But it was a lot harder back in those days somehow, even though it was still only a plane ride. Psychologically, it was a lot harder because it wasn't global like it is now, where every part of the world is part of the same industry. The Australian industry was over here being Australian and the Americans were over there being American. Harder to go backwards and forwards.
So how hard was it actually to even... I mean, obviously it takes years to get a green card.
Oh, yeah.
But if you are signed up, say, to an American... Was it an American label?
Yeah, Capitol.
Is that all organised for you?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
So that you can stay and work?
They can
obviously.
do that. Yeah, there's some restrictions. And eventually I did get a green card and it was all fine, a lot easier than it is now. But I think the thing that happened to me that was lucky was, even though I signed a Capitol and I made 2 albums with them and the albums weren't successful, during the period that I made those albums, it was once again the centre of the universe. You know, early 70s in Los Angeles is where everything was. All the best records were being made and the biggest stars were there and the great record producers and all amazing, amazing session players were all there. They just all happened to be there. And in comes little Brian, you know, lucky again.
Right place again.
Right place at the right time.
And of course you would have made amazing contacts.
And that's what happened because I started to be friendly with a lot of the players, you know, guys from Toto and all those kind of people who were all session guys. And they're the guys that would play on demos of songs that I'd written, and then they'd go and play that night with the Pointer Sisters and say, listen, I played on a song this afternoon, you need to record that. That's what happened when I got the Pointer Sisters cover.
Yeah.
It was because Davey Johnson had played on the demo.
And what song was that?
It's a song called Love is Like a Rolling Stone. And it was on, it's so funny, it was on the, well, I'll tell the story the other way. Davey said to them, listen, I played on this, so you got to, and so he had a cassette of it, and he played it, and the Pointers loved it. It was very, very R&B. So, and they said, oh yeah, we're going to do it, and we've got a session coming up, and why don't we get him to play the piano on it? And I said, oh, it's all fabulous, you know. So here am I, the Pointer Sisters, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's there, and it was just fabulous. And lovely players. But 2 things happened. First of all, I'm a basic piano player, and I play in all the white keys. I didn't mean that the way that sounded, but I don't play any of those horrible keys. And we did it in E. We did it in E, and we're playing away. And then one of the Pointers says, you know, it's just a little too high for me. Can we take it down a half a tone? Which put it in E flat, which is like playing with boxing gloves on for me. I just couldn't do anything. And I'm there, and they're all playing fabulously, and I'm going, clang, crong, ring, ding. And they're looking at each other as much as to say, this guy wrote this song and he can't play. It's shocking. So obviously my piano isn't on the record. And anyway, they rang up and they said, about a month later, my publisher rang up and he said, listen, I've got some bad news for you. They cut a lot of tracks that were R&B and then a lot of real pop ones, you know, like what finished up being that fabulous Pointers album. And they're not going to use any of the R&B tracks, so you're not on the album. So, you know, I'm a songwriter, I'm used to that. And I just go, well, it was a good, fun experience. I got a few photos taken and it was good. And about 2 weeks later, he rang and he said, I don't know whether this is going to be any consolation, probably not, but he said, you got the B-side to the first single, you know. And
Which was?
Which I think, B-side, big deal. It turns out the first single was Fire, and it sold 13.5 million copies or something in America alone.
And you got the
B-side.
B-side.
And you get paid the same for the B-side as you do for the A-side. So I have...
You're loaded.
The most successful,
You're loaded.
No, but the most successful record I ever had, no one's ever heard, except drunks who press the wrong button on jukeboxes at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I don't care.
I don't care.
Wrokdown.
Okay, tell us about the new album.
Well, the title, Quietly Rusting, was given to me by my doctor. He said, no, it's not. I'm really very happy with this album. It's the first studio album I've done in 20 years. And there was a reason for that. I think I just found I had enough. As a songwriter, I had this sort of metaphoric top drawer that I'd write a song and I'd say, no, I want that one. And I'd put it in, you know, and I said, one day I'll get enough to do an album, you know, of the things that I really want to do. And finally the old lady said, have a look in the top drawer. There's enough songs, do an album. And it was a great experience for me. And I did it with a lot of young players. And in a studio in Adelaide, it wasn't something I was familiar with. I sort of tried to break the mould a bit. Then came into Melbourne, of course, as you know, because we worked on the album together.
And you're going to do a song for us?
Yes.
What are you going to do?
I thought I might do Answer to a Prayer.
Would you please thank Mr. Brian Cadd?
Thanks, son. All the flags are flying low, baby, all along that heartbreak bridge. And all I took was what I carried across another burning bridge, on a road that don't go back again. The horizon is the sky, like a sunrise on a mountain. You came shining with forever in your eyes, like the answer to a prayer. You put your faith in me. I reach out for you and you are always there, like a vision in a dream. Your love is changing me, 'cause I believe in miracles, and you came like the answer to a prayer. Now I'm back in loving arms again. You're the fire in my soul. You're the angel God had waiting in the wings to get me through this rock and roll. Like the answer to a prayer, you put your faith in me. And I reach out for you, you are always there, like a vision in a dream. Your love is changing me, 'cause I believe in miracles. You came like the answer to a prayer. Standing on the edge by myself all alone, you took me by the hand, showed me the way, brought me home. Oh yeah, like the answer to a prayer. You put your faith in me, and I reach out for you, and you are always there, like a vision in a dream. Your love is changing me, 'cause I believe in miracles, and you came like the answer to a prayer. Like the answer to a prayer, you put your faith in me, and I reach out for you, and you are always there, like a vision in a dream.